guys, what's going on? It's Ultimus. We have today before us on the internet a bunch of Datamined info for Warlords, for Legion, not Warlords of Draenor. Everything from talent calculators, PvP talents, abilities, armor skins, all the details, new models, all that good stuff, professions. And so I decided I wanted to take a look at the talents for warriors, specifically arms, and get this out and kind of discuss this before doing my video that I talked to you guys previously about regarding the state of warriors and some of the danger they face going into Legion, I feel like, and just some of the problems and the fall-offs and all the pitfalls and things like that. So I figured at least getting an idea of all of this, looking at the talents, and kind of checking out the Datamined info as far as what's been removed and switched around, things like that, would be good. Especially because looking at some of the Datamined info is always tricky anyways, because it's hard to tell what was in there and has been removed, what's been changed, all that kind of stuff. Because you're getting basically a view of what has been a part of it up to this point. Whether it's still there or removed is always hard to tell. So looking at something a little more concrete seemed like a better idea. And so with this, we're going to take a look at the talent tree, and then we'll probably look at the PvP talents as well. But of course, just remember that this is all super early. This is the first we've seen it, so not that it's subject to changes, that I guarantee you a lot of it will change. So don't get too excited about something necessarily, and don't get your panties in a bunch if something turns out to be nothing that you're hoping for. So with that, let's go over and look at the abilities that you're going to get as an arms warrior, as you can see right here in the little gray box here. And I will be posting a link to the website that I'm pulling this information from, so you guys can check it out as well. And there's links and stuff where you can get to other classes as well, just a heads up. So we're going to pick arms. And as arms, our baseline abilities consist of Mortal Strike, Slam, Execute, Seasoned Soldier. While wielding a two-handed melee weapon, all damage dealt is increased by 10%. Victory Rush still functions the same. Colossus Smash, Tactician Slam, Whirlwind, and Execute have a 20% chance per target hit to reset the cooldown on Colossus Smash. Whirlwind still works the same. Cleave is back. That's an interesting choice as well. So it looks like it works pretty much the same way it did before. Sweeping attack strikes on enemies in front of you for 75% weapon damage, physical damage. For each target up to 5 hit, your next Whirlwind will deal 20% more damage. I am curious if you'll be able to, if Cleave will be on the global cooldown or not, because originally it wasn't. It shared a cooldown with Mortal Strike, but those were off the global cooldown. So I wonder if you could macro stuff into that, because we used to macro Whirlwind and Cleave onto each other and use that sometimes for extra AoE damage. It was kind of nice. But it's kind of cool that they're making Cleave and Whirlwind function together again. It'll be nice to have Cleave back again. I know a lot of people were like hit and miss on like Cleave is okay, but I always liked it as an attack, so it's kind of fun to see it coming back and being a baseline for warriors, not something we're gonna have to pick from. Hamstring is still around. Defensive stance. Now, defensive stance got hit with some interesting changes. A defensive combat stance that reduces all damage taken and damage done by 25%, and it lasts until canceled, so being able to swap in and out of that. And of course, there's improved defensive stance, which looks like you get it at level 92. Defensive stance now increases your armor by 10% and reduces damage taken by an additional 5%. So it stacks up a little bit higher and reduces and increases your armor. But the big change there is it reduces the damage you deal as well. So, I mean, obviously I'm biased and that sucks because nobody wants to see their class getting nerfed. But I feel like that might pigeonhole warriors a little bit too hard. If all you have to do is train the warrior to where he's basically going to be forced into sitting defensive stance, so I'm going to do 25% less damage. It just seems... I don't know how I feel about that, especially since, depending on how things work, we potentially will be building more rage by taking damage if they still keep that set bonus or some type of mechanic along those lines in the game. I just don't see that being an effective trade-off. I don't know. We'll see how it plays out, though. Though I guess that goes hand in hand with the... Fury taking more damage for simply being Fury. I mean, when you think, Fury's going to be in a place where they're going to take more damage and things like that to do more damage. So there's that trade-off. Warriors, it is stated too that warriors are going to have a higher health pool than typical. I think they said roughly I want to say 25%. It might be a little bit lower, though, so don't quote me on that. But I did read that warriors are going to have a higher health pool compared to other classes. Berserker Rage is an arms, specifically for arms, I should say. In this case, you go Berserk, removing and granting immunity to fear, sap, and incapacitate effects for 6 seconds. Fury works the same, also enrages you for 6 seconds. I wonder if Enrage is going to be back for arms warriors. It doesn't seem like it will be, but I'll be curious if it will be. Also, if I remember correctly, Berserker Rage... Sorry, my camera was freaking out there for a second. That was really strange. Berserker Rage does increase your damage, if I remember correctly, for Fury as well. But it doesn't seem to have that effect in arms. Plate Specialization functions the same way, increases your strength by 5% when wearing all plate armor. Recklessness, interesting different icon on that one, because from some of the Datamined information that we will kind of go over at a later date, possibly talk about a little bit here, and of course I will link that in the description as well, just for the sake of getting it out there for you guys to have access to it. But it looks like Battle Shout is gone. Not really sure what's up with that, so I'm curious to see what's going to be removed and what's going to stick around. So with Recklessness, you let loose a battle cry, granting your special attacks an additional 100% chance to critical strike for 5 seconds, but that's on a minute cooldown. I feel like that's a little bit... It lasts longer right now in live on Warlords of Draenor, but it has a longer cooldown as well, so that's interesting if it's on a minute cooldown, but it only lasts for 5 seconds. So a really small window for your burst. Mastery is Colossal Might. Increases the damage of your Colossus Smash by 20% and causes it to increase damage you deal to the target by an additional 20%. So as of right now, Colossus Smash is an ability that smashes the enemy's armor, dealing 1% of weapon damage. Physical damage, that can't be right though, 1% of weapon damage is physical damage. And increases damage you deal to them by 20% for 6 seconds. So when we get access to our mastery, that's going to increase by an additional 20%. And so curious to see how high we can stack this up and how much damage we can soak in by just like stacking mastery again. And then Commanding Shout, which is functioning the same way. Health buff, which I guess I should say stamina, maximum health by 15%. After it expires, health is lost. So same functionality, but again, no battle shout there, which is interesting. For Colossal Might and Colossus Smash, I feel like, and this is the closest thing we're going to get, and this is the closest thing we've had to Armor Pen since they removed Armor Penetration. I think that's why people like it so much. Now, we're going to move into our talents. Now, again, as always, these are subject to change. They might move stuff around, trees around, all that stuff like that, so don't freak out too much. We're just getting the information out there to talk about it. Hopefully you guys will enjoy it and give me some feedback. But they did mention that they're wanting to remove the whole idea of this is your stun tree, this is your CC tree, this is your health regen tree, this is your burst tree, all those kind of stuff. So as you can see, if it doesn't really look like there's a whole lot of organization to the talent tree. That's probably why. It's a very eclectic talent tree, it looks like. But in our first wave, in our level 15 tree, we have Shockwave, Stormbolt, and Sweeping Strikes. That one caught me off guard when I first got a look at the talent tree before I started recording. I pulled up the page just kind of get a brief overview of some of the stuff, and I was thinking, Sweeping Strikes is a talent? I don't know how I feel about that one. That's always just been a staple arms warrior spec, especially if we're supposed to be like the AoE melee masters. I don't know. But Shockwave for arms sends a wave of force in a frontal cone, causing 156.3% of attack power, damage and sending all damage within 10 yards for 4 seconds, and the cooldown is still reduced by 20 seconds if it hits at least 3 targets. So same functionality. Stormbolt works exactly the same as it does here on live, so we're not going to go over reading that. Then Sweeping Strikes, Mortal Strike and Execute hit a second nearby target. So that's interesting that they're making it a talent, and they're making it exclusive to a couple abilities. That one because I'm pretty positive right now on live, Sweeping Strikes just hits all of your attacks hit nearby additional targets. So that's interesting to see that they're locking it down to just Mortal Strike and Execute. As long as Execute and Mortal Strike do damage, I guess that's good. But if both of them hit like wet noodles, then I don't see Sweeping Strikes being much of an option. But making us choose between our two major stuns, that's intense. That's kind of crazy. Also, one thing I'll notice before we go any further is that Dragon's Roar is gone, which makes me really sad, at least for arms. We'll see when we get into Fury what it looks like. I haven't even looked at the Fury tree yet. But that's interesting that Dragon's Roar is gone, because I was hoping to see Dragon's Roar making a comeback. Impending Victory, your slam has a 40% chance to restore 10 of your health. That's interesting. So they're switching this talent from affecting Victory Rush, and they are making it to where it's going to affect your slam. Speaking of Victory Rush, did we see that on here? I don't think we did. Oh, there it is. Never mind. I freaked out for a second. I was like, no. But Victory Rush is still there. We Gucci. So Impending Victory is no longer going to affect Victory Rush, but instead it's going to affect slam. 40% chance. Not really digging that idea. Again, too much chance, not enough guarantee. So, not really excited about that particular talent. Bounding Strike. Heroic Leap's cooldown is reduced by 15 seconds, and it also increases your run speed by 70% for 3 seconds. So we're getting basically what was once a PvP set functionality, and then became a glyph functionality. Now we're getting it as a talent. Die by the Sword. Oh, what? They're making Die by the Sword a talent too? So this is what I'm curious about. What baseline defensives are we really going to have as a warrior other than sitting defensive stance? That makes me really uncomfortable. I'm not so sure how I feel about that. So Die by the Sword increases parry chance by 100% and reduces damage taken by 30% for 8 seconds on a 2-minute cooldown. That's interesting. Yeah, what defensives are we going to have as far as arms? Like, how am I going to be able to defend myself without having a pocket healer? That's intriguing to say the least. Dauntless, oh, that's interesting. Your abilities cost 20% less rage, which sounds great, except they're making us choose between that, Overpower, and Avatar. So Overpower's back, but it's a talent. That's disappointing. Instantly overpower the enemy, causing 125% of weapon damage. Physical damage cannot be blocked, dodged, or parried. Overpower has a 60% increased chance to be a critical strike, and your attacks have a chance to activate Overpower. So it's not something you're going to be able to just use. It's going to have to be activated. So kind of like it used to be back in the day, except it used to have to be dodged. So Overpower's gone through quite a few changes over the years, from having to be dodged to use, and then getting stacks, and then altogether disappearing, and now we're back. So it's just interesting to see where it's at. And then we have Avatar, which is still a 1.5 minute cooldown, transforms the warrior into a Colossus for 20 seconds, dealing 20% increased damage and removing all roots and snares. So basically the same functionality, but interesting that they're making us choose between the three. There's gonna, honestly, right now, what we're looking at, looks like there's honestly going to be some tough choices. Like, I don't even know if I would know where to begin necessarily right now, until I get my hands on warriors and what they feel like damage-wise and playstyle-wise, like what talents are going to be best to pick. I mean, I can get maybe a general feel for what I can guess, but it's interesting. Second Wind is a talent still. You gain 6% health every 1 second when you haven't taken damage in the past 5 seconds. So they're changing the way that looks. That's interesting. I don't know if that's better or worse than the current state of it, because I mean it sucks right now, but 6% health every 1 second while you haven't taken damage in the last 5 seconds. So if you can get away and just not take damage, I just don't see this being an optimal choice, especially in PvP. There's no way. The amount of hunters you're going to fight and stuff like that, and for like people who are really good at keeping dots up, like, you're never going to get this talent off. It's never going to work. I don't know. That's interesting. Not too excited about that. I don't see myself taking that initially. Double Time increases the maximum number of charges of charge by 1. And then Imposing Roar. Commanding Shout also increases leech by 20%. Oh, interesting. That's interesting. See, that I could see definitely being more effective than Second Wind. So just a buff to leech by 20% as of right now. But again, making me choose between that and Double Time when there's no other charge talents on the tree so far, that's interesting. I feel like they're just picking a whole bunch of different mechanics for different abilities and they're saying, alright, have fun, pick. You wanted the game to be hard, we'll make it hard for you. Fervor of Battle in the 75 tree is Cleave and Whirlwind generate 2 rage for each target that they hit. Okay, if you want to be more of an AoE monster there, so there's that. Rend is a talent. Now, in the Datamined abilities and things like that coming up for warriors, we did see that Deep Wounds is back. Deep Wounds is affected by your Mortal Strike. It applies it, and it causes the target to bleed until they reach full health. Once they reach full health, the effect is removed, but then all you gotta do is put Mortal Strike back up, and there it goes. So I was hoping that Rend was still going to stay. Like, I feel like they're picking a whole bunch of baseline stuff for warriors, and they're just making us pick in the talent trees. like, and this could still work out, especially because we haven't looked at the PvP talent trees. But initially, I feel like my initial first reaction is, while it's kind of exciting, it almost feels a little bit lazy, or just, I don't know, like, half of these are stuff we've already seen, already have. It's stuff, it's been baseline abilities, and they're just throwing them into the talent tree, and I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about all that. And I feel like, really quickly, so I mean, warriors, but no other spec really seems to be dealing with that in the same way. I mean, some of them do, but not. I don't know. Again, we'll have to see how this plays out, but it's just interesting. Heroic Strike is a talent, which is interesting as well. But then, of course, we have Bladestorm, which I personally think Bladestorm should just be a baseline cooldown for Arms Warriors as it is. That's just me, though, and I'm sure that will never happen. I've said that before, and I'll probably continue to say it. But functions pretty much the same way. 60-second cooldown, striking all targets within 8 yards for 60% of weapon damage. Physical damage every 1 second for 6 seconds. You're immune to movement impairing and loss of control effects, but can only use taunt and other defensive abilities. Well, what other defensive abilities? I don't really see any other defensive abilities. And channeling Bladestorm does not prevent avoiding attacks, so you can still avoid stuff, no big deal. Alright, so pretty much the same across all specs, and pretty much functions the same as it does now on live, which is cool. But picking between those two is tricky, and of course Fervor of Battle, which is interesting. Heroic Strike instantly deals 130% of weapon damage as physical damage. Heroic Strike gains double the normal damage bonus from Colossus Smash. So that's interesting. So with Colossus Smash, if you're taking Heroic Strike, you're going to pump even more damage in. So the burst can get even more lethal, which I think is interesting. And the fact that Heroic Strike only costs 15 rage makes it very, very accessible, and it's not on the global cooldown. So we're talking, you could make a special macro to where you could pump Mortal Strikes and Heroic Strikes into the target for just some gnarly damage. Which, it sounds fun. I mean, that stuff like that is fun enough to kind of off-put some of the disappointment initially, I suppose. Like, things like that are always kind of cool. I always like macroing Heroic Strike and Cleave into different attacks. Mortal Combos. That Mortal Strike has 2 charges. Very interesting, being able to pop Mortal Strike out there. And Titanic Might increases the duration of Colossus Smash by 200, but halves its effectiveness. So I'm curious how this is going to work out with our Mastery. Because if we can stack our Mastery high enough, it's going to negate this effect. Because if you get the 20% base damage, damage increase on the target by 20% is baseline with Colossus Smash. Mastery makes it stack by an additional 20%. Of course, that's going to scale with Mastery, but this halves the effectiveness. So this basically nullifies your Mastery. But once you stack your Mastery high enough, you're still going to get the full effect or close to it. So the fact that this, makes it last 200% longer, that's a large window when you consider how long Colossus Smash lasts initially, 6 seconds. So you times that by what, 4? If you double it, it's going to be 12 seconds. So what, 18 seconds, 24 seconds, something like that? That's a really long window either way. Even if it just reaches 18 seconds, that's a lot longer. That's a lot more damage you can pump into a target, especially if your Mastery is high enough. So curious to play around with that and see what this looks like. And again, some tough choices in a sense here, because 2 charges and a Mortal Strike sounds great. Having Heroic Strike sounds great because of the way it interacts with Colossus Smash, and of course, just increasing the duration of Colossus Smash sounds even better as well. Anger Management, every 10 rage that you spend reduces the remaining cooldown of recklessness of your abilities by 1 second. Currently, right now on live, I think it's every 30 rage you spend, so that's interesting that it's been buffed to the point to where now it's 66% more effective. You're looking at 10 rage. That's nothing. If you think about a warrior, if you play a warrior, you know how quickly you go through rage. Especially right now, which I think is one of the problems with warriors, is the way they generate rage. It feels like you don't necessarily generate enough, and your DPS can fall off if you're just blowing your rage on whatever the heck you want. Opportunity Strikes. Your melee abilities have an up to 30% chance based on target's missing health to trigger an extra attack that deals physical damage, and it's 200% of weapon damage. Oh, dang. So that's kind of intense. Like, 30% chance. More RNG is kind of disappointing, but this is the kind of thing you would expect to be RNG. Based on target's health, that's crazy. So is it going to proc more when they're lower or higher health? But either way, an extra attack that deals 200% weapon damage. That's gnarly. I hope that's not a typo because that sounds fun. And then Ravager's still pretty much the same from what I can tell. Yeah, Whirlwind weapon that you drop on the area. Everything within 6 yards takes damage. 61.5% of attack power is the damage. Also increases your chance to parry by 30%. Don't see that being very effective in PvP. It's just never has been. Probably never will be unless they just buff the damage. But some interesting choices they are giving us here for all of this, which I think is very, very interesting. Now, before we go any further, I want to take a look at the PvP talents. So let's go ahead and jump over and take a look at those. So let's get this nice and zoomed in for you guys here so we can see this a little bit better. But what we're looking at here is the very first look at the PvP talent trees. As it says up here at the top, you're working on a nice talent calculator, but here's a rough idea of the choices you can make. You can only select one talent per row. The rows unlock first, followed by the columns based on your prestige level. So again, you're going to unlock more of these as you gain more prestige. Obviously, these talents aren't close to final or even complete, and some talents are not defined yet. So keep that in mind. Don't get too excited, and don't get your panties in a bunch. We cool? We cool. All right, let's move on. So we're looking at the first row, and this is the column, if I'm not mistaken. Correct? If I'm wrong, that's cool. I've never been very, very smart. We're looking at Gladiator's Medallion, Adaptation, Relentlessness. So just curious to see. Oh, sweet, they do have tooltips on them. Gladiator's Medallion. So this is basically your PvP trinket. So that's kind of nice. Again, as we went into Legion from Gamescom when they first announced a lot of the stuff, we knew this was coming. PvP talent tree, no longer going to have to buy a PvP trinket. It's going to come baseline. So what this means for the human ratio, we're yet to see. But everyone's been QQing and complaining about that for a while. So I'm curious to see what Blizzard will do about it, if anything. Pretty much functions the same way. 2-minute cooldown removes all movement and pairing effects and all effects which cause loss of control of your character. Adaptation at full loss of control, or all full loss of control effects with duration of 5 seconds or longer will be removed shortly after being applied. This effect has a 1.5 second or minute cooldown. That's intense. So anything basically that would cause you full loss of control longer than 5 seconds, every 1.5 minutes has a chance to just be completely removed. Interesting. And then Relentlessness, duration of incoming crowd control effects reduced by 25%. So this basically similar to the orc racial as well, which I'm curious again what they're going to do with that. I think it was also dwarf racial as well. It reduces like stuns and things like that effective against you by 20-25%. But this is all crowd control effects, so that'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Now in our second row, we've got some different options here between DPS, tank, healer, all that kind of stuff. So I'll be curious to see how all that works out. But for DPS, we're looking at Train of Thought, damage increased by 15%. Being attacked will cancel this effect for 8 seconds. So it's the whole idea of you have nothing interrupting you, nothing's really doing anything to you, so you're just getting a nice little buff to your damage. I could see hunters taking this because they're standing, especially like marksman hunters or beastmastery hunters, because they're going to be standing so far back and out of the fray. They just that extra damage while they're standing still, I think, is going to be pretty gnarly. Tanks are looking at hardiness. While above 80% health, you take 20% less damage. I'm not sure what the question mark is on the second take option, but it's Relentless Assault. Being attacked increases your damage by 3%, lasts for 10 seconds, and it stacks up to 5 times. So gives you incentive to get in there and mix it up, and once people start attacking you back, you're going to be getting this buff on yourself. Kind of cool. Healer talent here in the second row is Defender of the Weak. After healing a target below 50% health, you gain 20% haste for 5 seconds. And 50% health is not super low at all. Like, people dip below 50% all the time and they're fine in PvP, so that's pretty generous. In the second row here, or the second column, I should say, we're looking at Mind Quickness, increases your haste by 15%, which is interesting simply because I know haste is going to affect Fury Warriors in one way or another, so that'd be interesting to see if any Fury Warriors go for that one. Reinforced Armor is your health is increased by 10%. The other tank talent is Fortitude, health increased by 20%. Wait, that doesn't make any sense. Alright, well, curious to see how that works out. Since, I mean, 10 or 20%. 10 or 20%. I mean, unless you're trying to try hard it and got something to prove, I don't really see how there's really much of a choice there. Vim and Vigor for the healer is while you are at or above 80% health, your healing is increased by 20%. So, incentive to keep yourself topped off or keep heals on you so you can get more out of your heals. Because obviously, more healing out of your casts is more efficient, simply because you're not spending as much mana to keep people alive, and bigger heals are always fun. DPS initiation. Critical strike chance is increased by 30% on targets at or above 80% health. Oh, that's brutal. So we're going to see crits flying out there if you take this talent at the start of a PvP match. Sparring. Physical melee attacks have a 20% chance to be blunted, dealing 50% reduced damage. Oh, dang. That's just going to, like, shut down melee, please. Holy cow. What I'm curious about, too, is if you'll be able to change these talents in an arena while you're waiting for the match to start like you can any other talent. Because I feel like you could easily pick talents in here. They're going to shut down certain cleaves and comps. That could be very, very interesting and a very different dynamic to arena PvP. Any non-periodic attack that deals damage less than 10% of your maximum health is completely absorbed. That's one of the tank ones, soften blows. Any non-periodic attack that deals damage. Okay, interesting. And then for healers, we got Inner Renewal. Healing yourself directly will refund 50% of the spell's mana cost. So that's kind of cool. So basically, heals you directly, costs you 50% less mana, which is kind of nice. Hardiness in our third row, first column, I guess, third row, first column. That's confusing. While above 80% health, you take 20% less damage. So interesting that that's a tank one there, but then it's out. So again, this is all very intro, and some of these might be not where they're supposed to, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, reinforced armor is there, but it's also here, so I'm curious. It probably meant to be here rather than up there. Health increased by 10%. In sparring, same thing with that one. Interesting. Death row. You can now execute targets at or below 25% health. Interesting. So it buffs execute up by 5% to this, or like with the window. I don't know if I said this initially, but we are looking at the warrior PvP talents. I think we did, but just to be clear, we're throwing that out there now. Pro YouTubing is pro. Bloodhunt. When within 10 yards of enemies at execute range, your movement speed is increased by 15%, and all snares are suppressed for 5 seconds. Interesting. So this is gonna like just completely encourage tunnel visioning a target. But of course you're gonna have to pick between that and death row. It's interesting. And then death sentence execute now has a 15-yard range, causing you to charge to targets when you see. Ooh, see that I like. That's interesting. More charge type mechanics, more mobility. This might address some of the ability or mobility issues for warriors. Initially, I can honestly say right off the bat, death sentence sounds a little bit more appealing to me than any of these other talents here, as cool as they might be, and they have their place I could see, but just getting that extra charge to me sounds great. And then over here we have sword and board for the protection. Whereas increase your critical strike chance of your devastate by 30%, and shield slam deals 20% more damage while shield block is active. So sword and board used to be just a proc that you'd get for prot warriors, if I'm not mistaken, and now it's just going to be a PvP talent. Interesting stuff. Protection is going to get Sentinel, increase your damage done by 25%, and also reduces damage taken by 25%. Oh dang. So that's just a flat out buff. Do more damage, take less damage, get out there, mix it up. Curious if, because it says protection only, that'd be fun for arms. Why can't we have that? Rage Machine, or Against the Machine? I don't know, just an idea. Attacks against you generate 5 rage. So there's the rage generating mechanic there for being attacked. Tenderizer, which is auto attacks against targets above 80% health generate 5 rage. Okay. And then Ready for Battle, rage gained from charge is increased by 15%. So that's basically one of our glyphs right now. It's getting integrated into a talent. Arms is getting Intercept, specifically run a high speed toward an ally or enemy. When targeting an enemy, Intercept will root them for 1.5 seconds. When targeting an ally, Intercept will intercept all melee and ranged attacks against them within 10 seconds while the target remains within 10 yards. It generates 20 rage and it replaces charge. Oh, that's disappointing. I was going to say on top of charge. That's kind of cool, but it makes sense that if you can use it on enemy targets as well as friendlies, it would replace charge. So we're seeing this be done to where basically Intercept is back. Intercept was an old charge mechanic that we had back in Vanilla Burning Crusade, and I think it was around in Wrath of the Lich King as well. And it got to the point where it used to be only Fury, then it came to Arms, if I'm not mistaken. My memory is a little bit cloudy on there. Maybe it was the other way around. It used to be just Fury, then came to Arms, or maybe it was both across both, and then it only went to Fury. Either way, it's an old spell, now it's back in the game, and they're changing the mechanics a little bit, and they're making it replace charge instead of working along with charge. I do remember Intercept, you used to have to be in Berserker stance, I guess it was Berserker stance to use it back before they removed Berserker stance. So that's interesting. Fury gets Leap. That's a riveting skill, just instant. Whatever it does it instantly. And Protection is getting Leave No Man Behind. Using Intervene on allies reduces all damage received. So reduces all damage they receive by 90% for 1.5 seconds. Nice way to shut down some burst, that's for sure. So interesting, but that's interesting that they put it. Oh no, Intervene, not Intercept. Herp derp, I can read. Intervene, not Intercept. All right, cool. Never mind. There's no conflict there. Arms here in our second column on the what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6. We're going with 6. Sixth line here is Pain Train. Charge resets the cooldown of your Colossus Smash. Ooh, that's kind of cool. Okay. Lots of usefulness there. Temper Control and Rage Regeneration's cooldown is reduced to 30 seconds, but now only heals 15% of your maximum health. Because we don't even see Enrage Regeneration here on the baseline abilities or the talent, so obviously like stuff is missing and not there, which is fine. Curiouser and Curiouser. Where we at? There we go. Temper Control. Protection. Morale Killer. Demoralizing Shout now reduces the damage enemies deal to all targets, not just you. Cool. And then for Arms, it gets a Booming Voice. Your Battle Shout now also affects all nearby allies within 10 yards. So Battle Shout is apparently still there. It's just not on the list anywhere. So intriguing again. So there's obviously stuff missing, or there's just not been implemented yet. Fury is getting Thirst for Battle. Bloodthirst clears all snares. It increases your movement speed by 15% for 2 seconds. Snap. That's kind of cool. And then, oh, Shield Bash is back. That's cute. Protection. Shield Bash. Bash the target with your shield, dealing 1 plus 410% of attack power, physical damage, and reducing their damage done by 15%. If the target is casting, the cooldown is instantly reset. So instead of interrupting casts now, you are basically, it's resetting the cooldown on this if you cast it while the opponent is casting. So that's kind of cool. Wrecking Crew. Colossus Smash effects now apply to all nearby enemies within 8 yards of the target. Oh, dang. So it just like drops like a big old AoE Colossus Smash on people. Dang. Fury is getting Slaughterhouse. When you use Bloodthirst, the damage is increased by 1%, and the cooldown is reduced by 1 second for every 1% health the target is missing. Interesting. That 1% can't be right, though. The damage is increased by 1%. Cooldown is reduced by 1 second for every 1% health the target is missing. So that first 1% has got to be off, but the rest of it makes sense. Interesting. So you're basically going to reduce that cooldown pretty gnarly if the target is a pretty low health. Interesting. Thunderstruck. Thunderclap roots all targets for 1 second. Kind of nifty. Arms gets Echo Slam. Colossus Smash deals an additional 10% of the target's total health and damage 2.5% later, or 2.5 seconds later. Damage done ignores all armor. Oh, dang. So you drop Colossus Smash on the target, and then 10% of the target's total health it deals in damage 2.5 seconds later. And it just ignores armor. That's intense. Interesting. So you're going to get that initial Colossus Smash plus the Colossus Smash debuff, and then 2.5 seconds later it's going to drop another hit on the target. If Warlocks keep a gnarly health pool in Legion, I could see that being pretty devastating for them. And then protection is getting Warpath. You stun all targets you pass through with Intercept and land on top of with Heroic Leap. Oh, dang, that's kind of cool. So everything that is in your way when you're charging just gets stunned, and whatever you land on top of is going to get stunned with Heroic Leap. That's pretty dope. I love that. Arms is getting Sharpened Blade over here in the last one, which is when activated, your next Mortal Strike will deal 50% increased damage and reduce healing taken by 70%. Oh, dang. So that's just an instant. You can activate it. That's like for setting up kills for sure. That's kind of cool. Interesting concept. And of course, they're making us choose between that and Death Wish. Oh, man. Increases damage done by 5% of the cost of your health. Stacks up to 5 times. Oh, dang. So 10% of your total health. You can stack it up to 5 times. So essentially, you can get rid of 50% of your health. You can deal up to 25% more damage. Interesting. So Death Wish for sure. If you're going to take that one, make sure you got a healer that's ready, or else you're going to be in a tough situation. But that's kind of a cool mechanic. I like that. But Sharpened Blade sounds intense too. So, wow. Okay. So crazy first look here at the PvP talents. First comment for sure. Looks interesting. So some of the stuff they're making us choose between is very conflicting. Like, I'm already having a hard time deciding what I think I'm going to go with for my warrior and stuff like that, because there's just a lot of tough decisions here. I'm between Avatar and Overpower itself. Throw in the idea that with Dauntless my abilities can do, cost 20% less rage. Having to choose Sweeping Strikes now and Die by the Sword. Like, I really need to know what our defensives are going to be. That's kind of killing me. And the fact that some spells are just missing. We've got, Battle Shout isn't here. There's no real defensives in here aside from Defensive Stance, which is kind of an ugly trade-off. Some interesting changes coming for Arms Warriors, but they're definitely not in a horrible spot, so I'm really not feeling too grim about it. I'm just curious to see how this is all going to play out, especially looking at some of the Datamined information, what we know, what we don't know, all that kind of stuff. But this video is really long as it is, so we'll end this one, and then we'll come back and we'll look at Fury and Prot eventually. But I do apologize for this being so long, but I felt like it was worth talking about, especially because all this stuff is just so new, and I know you guys are as excited about it as I am. So I'm going to draw this one to a close. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, please hit it with a like. Feel free to leave me your comments or any of your input down in the comment section. I'd love to hear what you guys think. And yeah, as always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.